Hey guys, welcome back to another tutorial, and in this tutorial I want to show you how to compress your top snare and your bottom snare to make sure that they pop and they cut through the mix. So let's get started then. We'll start with the top snare. For the top snare, the goal is to get a punchy sound. So you want something that has a slow attack and a fast release time with a ratio of about 3:1 up to 4:1. That should definitely work. So let's check out the this chop snare with and without the compression. So this is without the compression. The snare is fine, but what I want to do is to emphasize the attack. So to do that, I'll use a slow attack and a fast release. Check it out. As you can hear, now the snare is popping. So this compression will definitely help the snare cut through the mix. Let's check out the snare with and without. So I'll just keep switching between with, without, and with. As you can hear, without the compression, the snare sounds dull and boring. So the compression helps emphasize the attack of the snare to help it pop and to help it become more present. So let's check out the bottom. Let's check out the bottom snare. So let's solo the bottom snare. And then for the bottom snare, I'm going for something different from what I did with the top snare. So with the bottom snare, I want to bring up the decay of the snare to help the snare ring. And to achieve that, what I do is to use a fast attack, not something that's too fast that it will choke the snare or add any artifacts or distortion. So what I do is to use a fast attack, but not too fast. And then I increase the release a bit to emphasize the decay of the snare. One other thing that I have to mention is that you have to use a high ratio so that you don't get any splat. Finally, you want to use a very high gain reduction to make sure that you compress the attack of the snare and bring up the decay of the snare. So let's check out the snare without the compressor. As you can hear, the snare has attack and it's popping. So we want the opposite for this for the bottom snare. So here it is with the compression. As you can hear, I brought down the transients or attack of the snare and emphasized the decay. So I'll just keep switching between before and after so that you guys can hear the difference. As you can hear with the compression, the snare sounds longer and it doesn't have a lot of attack because the top snare is the one that's going to take care of the attack. So now let's check out both the bottom and the top snare with and without compression. So I'll link these two channels. Okay, let's start without. As you can hear, both the top and the bottom snare are doing the same thing. They all have attack and it won't work in the mix. So what you want to do is to make sure that the bottom snare doesn't have any attack. It only deals with the decay, and then the top snare is the one that's going to deal with the punch and the attack. So check it out with both compressors. As you can hear, now the snare is popping. Now it becomes one snare drum sound with those different compression settings. So I'll just keep switching between before and after so that you guys can be able to hear the difference. So the difference is simply day and night. You can be able to tell the difference. Now the snare is much more clearer. Both the bottom and the top snare are not doing the same thing. You can't even tell that it's two different snare drums. You think it's one snare. So for the bottom snare, I'm going for a smoother sound, and then for the top snare, I'm going for something that's punchy. That's how you compress your top and bottom snare. So it's really that simple. Don't complicate it. One other thing that I have to emphasize is that for the bottom snare, make sure that you are using a very high gain reduction, because you want to make sure that you compress the attack or the transient very hard. And then you also want to use a very high ratio setting for the bottom snare. That's it. If you have any questions, make sure that you leave your questions in the comment section, and I'm always here to help. That's all for now. Cheers.